All right, I think we're going to get started. We are all gathered here on this dreary Friday because you have joined us for the kickoff to start considering supports and structures that lead to more equitable outcomes. And at the very least, you viewed the recording of the virtual session. Then you chose the faculty interest group that you wanted to participate in this semester. And maybe you'll decide to do the other one next semester. But it seemed like what you chose this semester was more pertinent, sort of on your mind, something that you really wanted to dive into right away. So let me give you a general sense of how the virtual sessions are going to go for the next 3. So the facilitator group will share a reading. Next time will be much earlier than when you got this reading, for you to sort of dive into, consider how the reading applies to the group you're in. We will start every virtual session with about 30 minutes. And Kate promises a much longer reading. We'll start the first 30 minutes of each session together, discussing the reading, thinking about how it applies to our own teaching, and then break out into our working groups for the remaining 20 to 25 minutes. In between that, we'll also ask you to submit some assignments on Brightspace in preparation for the following virtual session. We did promise you no more than 20 hours of work, including the meeting. So we're really just mindful of your time and your capacity, but also so grateful that you will join us for so many of these sessions and chat with us together. Okay.
So how is this homework going to be? It's going to be posted on Brightspace?
It's going to be posted on Brightspace, yes. And maybe this is a good segue, actually, to why don't I show you quickly how the Brightspace organization is set up, and then we will dive into our discussions. Thank you, Toy. Let me get to this page here. Okay, so all of you should be enrolled into the faculty interest group organization. It's under the organizations tab, not under your semester teaching tab, okay? And you'll see these 3 cute little figs. And as you enter, thanks, Fritz. You'll see as your own Brightspace is set up, the announcements, I have just a short welcome page here, but what you are most interested in is the assignments tab here, where I did not, I said that they would be available at 3 o'clock. So let me show you from the programming side. When you click on assignments after our session, you will see assignments for all FIG members. So that's all of you. And so the first one is to upload your current seminar syllabus. This is the one that you want to dive into and revise for this FIG semester. You'll see a category of only if you are in my Inclusive Pedagogy FIG group, you are submitting these assignments. And Natasha is shortly after this session, I think she's going to also add her assignments, and you'll see only complete this if you are in the Career Readiness FIG. So I don't want you to spend the time doing the assignments for the group that you're not in, but if you do, that's fantastic. But what you want to focus on is the assignments for all FIGs and the assignment for your particular group. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see if folks can I make that any clearer? Anyone need me to clarify anything? Where to find things? Carla?
So if we're not teaching a seminar, it would still be the equivalent general education course. So Psych 101.
Yes.
Okay.
Carla, I'm so sorry, I forgot about my Psych 101 folks in the room. You would probably want to be revising your Psych 101 course. So I know that folks have they might be teaching multiple different courses, but there are particular ones that what we're doing will be extra relevant for. Michaela, how do we know which FIG again? My staff member, Jennifer, can tell you, Michaela, which one you're in, the one that you signed up for, and she'll drop it into a private DM for you. Anyone else who's not sure of that, you thought both groups were, sounded great and you forgot which one you actually signed up for, let us know and Jen can do a quick search and let you know. Okay. Any other? Yes, Kate. You're not muted, but I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
My headset is not working, so I'm gonna be screaming over my dog. I just wanted to be very clear about because we're using this term assignments since that's the way the Brightspace is set up. But most of the activities that we ask you to do will be practical in nature. So we're going to be asking you to look at your syllabus, to think about your teaching, to try new things in your classes. So it's we're trying to make sure that it doesn't take active time of writing long treaties for us and for Brightspace, but really it's more about thinking and trying things, and they are ungraded, as Nancy pointed it out.
We will certainly review and support and maybe poll to continue discussions, but they're certainly ungraded. Mark? Mark, I can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
For me now?
Yes.
I just went to Brightspace and unlike in Blackboard, I don't see a tab for organization.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Okay.
oh.
Maybe I'm looking at the wrong place.
Yeah.
Your screen again here.
Yeah. I saw Nancy's screen that she kind of had to scroll to the
Yeah. All will also get you everything, but if you scroll to the right of the stuff here for you, you should see an organizations tab, because the college also enrolls you, maybe without your knowledge, to some organizations as well. So let me know if that fixes things.
Okay, I can find it later.
Okay, yeah, and I mean, Natasha and I are here. We can jump on Zoom with you and anyone else if you can't find that organization space.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Anything else before we move on? Okay, excellent. So we shared with you what we thought would be a great introduction to who Gen Z is. Maybe some of these things some of these things still surprise me, and I've been trying to understand Gen Z for a long while now. And so we'll dive into some discussion questions, basically just to get a better sense of what we're noticing in general through this article, what we're noticing in the classroom, and then we'll do a little bit more work in our respective FIG groups. So in this reading, what was surprising to you to find about Gen Z? I see some folks who are like, there were so many things. And I'm just going to drop the link here to the article one more time. If you want to open it up, it was so skimmable. Thanks to Kate. She said we had 3 days to share this. This is going to be easy to digest. So you can go ahead and bring this up, and feel free to raise your hand to share or share in chat. We can, we'll keep the conversation going that way. Toy.
Okay, I'm not sure I understood it, but I've read elsewhere that this generation doesn't like face-to-face contact, like for dating. That they're very awkward at parties, because what they like is they like the electronics. So when it says in the article they like face-to-face encounters, are we talking about face-to-face via video or face-to-face via human beings?
That is such a great comment to kick us off. Folks, if you have things to add to that, go ahead and put that in chat or raise your hand. I found the same thing to be interesting, that we thought that, so this is a heavy tech generation. Most of them have had tech their whole lives, very accessible to other people in that way. But it surprised me to see that it was like 83% of Gen Zers prefer face-to-face. But here are also some things to build into that context. When we offer, and Natasha, jump in if this resonates with you too, we offer in-person, online, and high flex engagement events throughout the semester. And that is because during COVID, we had to pivot, but also we heard, well, students really like the online. Turns out most students, if they are on campus, are going to prefer the in-person, the face-to-face, as the article is saying.
Wow.
What it ends up being is also convenience too, right? So I might, if I'm nowhere near the campus and I really want to join this event, sure, I will jump on an online just because I can and it's there. But for the most part, since students are choosing more in-person classes, they're just choosing to go to these face-to-face events. And this semester, there's something in the air. Students are coming to engagement events in droves. Like in the ice cream, the first year ice cream Inside Scoop event with professors, we have never run out of ice cream. And I think we were down by, we could have used maybe 20 more scoops of ice cream. So many students attended.
We definitely ran out of materials and seats, which was surprising because I hadn't seen that since before the pandemic.
Yes. So students clearly want to be in community. I think that Sarah's at the club events too, they're claustrophobic. Yes, so many students are showing up. Students want to be in community despite having all this access to tech. And it seems that folks, you all in the room, our programming is helping students feel like this community is a very accepting space for them, right? That they really belong here. So they're attending in these great numbers. Kate?
Yeah, so I just wanted to actually maybe offer some clarification there, because I think that in the reading, if I remember this correctly, the face-to-face was specifically about their face-to-face communication preferences. And I'm saying this because I do have a Gen Z, actually 2 Gen Z children at home. And so we do talk about, everybody knows that they don't email, right? They prefer text, but what they really prefer is FaceTime, right? So it's digital communication. You're not necessarily in the same space, but you do see the other person and you allow them to see as much of yourself as you feel comfortable doing. If elsewhere in the article, we talked about how much they are willing to, or we read about how much they are willing to share about themselves in these online spaces, or not willing to share, and how much they want to find out about others. So to me, that was interesting about the way we communicate with our students, but also when we move to the second part of the session to the professional preparation, what it means about their functioning in the workplace. So if anybody here has Gen Z parents, one of the parenting tricks that I was told that I had to do before I would, launch my kids is ask them to make an appointment over the phone and interact with someone over the phone. Really, really hard for them. And that is something we do, in our professional lives all the time, making a phone call, getting something done. So I think, and this, to me, this just underscores why it is important, even before we jump into how we can prepare students and how we can address, what they need in the classroom. we need to understand where they are, because they are surprisingly not where I thought they would be, honestly. So that's my comment.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. Anyone else want to add to this before we move to Ahili's point? Okay, so Ahili shares that another fact that students are referring more often to mental health challenges. In the article, you saw that anxiety for Gen Z is way up, ADHD is way up, and part of this is, of course, living through or surviving through a pandemic and everything that was involved in that exacerbation of barriers they had already, loss of family members, the uncertainty and the impermanence of life in general. What other things in the article may have led to this increased mental health challenges for this group, for this generation, that you noticed? Susan?
So it's not like exactly in the article, but based on talking to my friends with Gen Z kids, my kids are Gen Alpha. It's, I think, having that technology at an early age, and a lot of people didn't understand just how hard like social media would be on like developing young people's brains. I think a lot of them like maybe develop some of these things, like you add the pandemic plus the access to the internet plus all this social media. And I know one of my friends literally said to me, I never would have let my daughter have Instagram at age 10 if I knew that she was going to be in a residential facility for eating disorders by the time she was 16. I would have never let her do that. And for that reason, like my kids only have dumb phones, talk and text only. But like these are things that people didn't know. So I mean, I think that access at such a young age without understanding that the possible outcomes was something that Gen Z grew up with more than millennials did.
Yeah, absolutely. And the quickness, not just Instagram, but all the access to all the different tools, it leads so many folks to thinking that they're not enough and they should be doing different things. They're looking at people's highlight reels and wondering if they belong in different spaces. And yes, that is certainly leading to a lot of mental health struggles, particularly around self-esteem, for sure.
And
Fritz?
cyberbullying.
Oh, yes. And cyberbullying. So it's so easy to bully behind a keyboard, right, nowadays, that the other generations did not have to go through. Fritz, did you want to elaborate on your sarcastic comments?
Well, the form is sarcastic, the intent is real, right? That mental health struggles do get celebrated. It is what distinguishes you from a world gone crazy. And there's no doubt that there's a celebration of it, and it invites the diagnosis. But these are separate issues, right?
Yes. It reminds me of students and Gen Zers ownership too, that I am someone with whatever it is, anxiety or something like that, or I am an anxious person, right? That becomes part of their identity, certainly. Yeah, Carla?
Well, I also just wanted to add to what the quote that Paul pulled out about 60% of them wanting to change the world. I have to say that what I've noticed in my students is that they're a lot more aware of systemic issues, right? They're very passionate about social justice. They're aware of a lot of these issues, and who would not be anxious, I think, when you're living in a world where these systemic issues are absolutely real and you're railing against injustice and people gaslight you into thinking that you're shallow, because that tends to be the view that we have of this generation, is that they're shallow and self-absorbed, and I don't think that's actually true. So
Oh, yes, and to be continuously misunderstood that way, right? And Carla, your point also reminds me that related to the social media point that Susan brought up, if you are an advocate and passionate for lots of different justice issues, likely your social media feed is filled with horrible things, right? Your scroll is not the same scroll as someone who doesn't really care or dive into those areas. The other interesting thing I want to share is in the past couple of years, in our survey to incoming first-year students about their areas of interest, criminal justice reform has consistently been the #1 area of interest, followed by law and legal services, and maybe not surprisingly, public safety and law enforcement. So students, our students in particular probably are coming with a lot of these passionate social justice issues. Nora mentions in the chat that she feels grateful to have been able to make mistakes as a young person without having them published all over the internet. Yes, yes. You can't get away with things, you know, and students are being filmed, everyone is being filmed, right? And that is easily uploaded to all of these different spaces, and they never go away, right? Braces and perm, yeah. Michaela?
Hi, sorry if there's a little bit of background. I'm outside right now.
No,
Oh,
you sound
but nonetheless, I was like, just to piggyback off of like what everyone's been saying, one of the things that I noticed a lot is the anxiety specifically. And in the article, I noticed that it said even before pandemic, the anxiety for Gen Z was already higher. And I think that because of like their access to things like social media and technology at such an early age, I think like Carla was mentioning, that like that maybe like has contributed to like even pre-pandemic and now post-pandemic, how they have like their anxiety increasing, whether that's likelier to have be diagnosed with eating disorders, body image issues, et cetera, especially even with young men, like, you know, the loneliness epidemic that we see with young men specifically, contributing to more violence and things like that. And also like to add on to what Fritz was mentioning, I think that like with mental health struggles, there's a belonging that I see a lot more with this group, like a readiness to identify with like all different disorders, whereas like with previous generations, there was more like an aversion to that, like, you know, not really wanting to belong or identify with having autism, ADHD, depression, things like that, where there's a sense of belonging with having these disorders that they get, and much more camaraderie that I see with Gen Z and these type of disorders.
Yes, that camaraderie. I mean, it is, I think society has also done a lot of work in helping folks acknowledge being unwell and seeking help for that, that aren't the same as in generations before. And so, of course, folks may have been struggling in the same way, but because they haven't been reported as heavily because of this quote unquote celebration, there was just no space for them. And now we see Gen Zers and students sort of owning, they feel like they're not alone in owning, let's say, anxiety and some of the other struggles that they have, and there is space for them to share that they're unwell and hopefully get support around that. What Michaela mentioned also reminded me of like connecting this, we see on the one hand high anxiety and introversion, because I know that you've seen in your classes also a lot of introversion, like shyness or fear of raising your hand to participate, while we also see that students prefer face-to-face interactions. And I wonder if part of that is Gen Zers, they're the generation of like vibes. Do you know what I mean, right? So in person, you can sense someone's what they would call vibe, right? But whether this is a welcoming space, is this a person that is safe to talk to? Is this a person that I would want to get to know more, right? Whereas in text, And on the phone and an email, it is just very impersonal, and they can't tell whether or not they can trust the person on the other end, right? Let me stop here. Paul mentions that in teaching criminal justice and environmental justice with knowledge of our exceeding planetary boundaries, it is helpful to mix the teaching with cooperative governance solutions that provide examples of agency, what they can do as strategy to mitigate existential anxiety. So rather than only exploring how we got here and what all the problems are, and this is all the stuff that they see in their feeds anyway, focusing on what folks can do maybe as individuals or as a community in order to move forward. Absolutely. Nate shares that I think older generations have become quick to pathologize young people. Yes, for behavior that is developmentally appropriate. Yes, yes, yes. Everyone is a mess in their early 20s. I don't believe my students are collectively broken, or at least no more than the rest of us. I love that point, and I so wholeheartedly agree. There are moments when, I read something about Gen Z, they don't like ambiguity, and I think to myself, none of us like ambiguity, right? Gen Zers like digestible, clear information. Well, who doesn't, right? Like, who doesn't want digestible, clear information? So sometimes maybe as Nate is pointing out, we're trying to find something there that's not really there, that's just super normal, and really something that inclusively we could all enjoy more of and appreciate. Sarah mentions, I wonder if they are better at parsing tone on email and text than we are. Yeah, it's probably part of that too, and that's why SASP takes a lot of time in our work to write the tone of our messages very carefully. We are really painstakingly careful about the warmth, about inclusion, about clarity. And I think it helps us get a lot more responses from students. But absolutely, if folks are writing just in their natural voice without the specific intent to draw new Gen Zers in, it might not get the response that we're looking for in Gen Zs. Michaela, is this hand still up or hand up again?
No, I am so sorry. I thought I took it down. Let me take it down. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, Nancy, I don't know. I think that the tone is something they could work on in emails, not necessarily understanding sometimes how it could come across. That's something I've worked on with students. So like, okay, well, how did you intend this? Here's how I read it. I know you didn't intend it this way, but somebody else may not think that in another context,
I all
Yeah.
agree. The students are writing in their way, and we can help with that. But I'm talking about the person writing to Gen Zers, and right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I'm sorry, Nancy, I don't know how to raise my hand. Do I?
We refer to the older generation of just raising the
Yes, it's like I think the idea of this quest for authenticity for Gen Zers, that they value that in others, and often it's responding to Natasha, when they sometimes feel that when we ask them to write that email differently, then we're asking them to be fake, right? So that authentic voice and fake voice. And it's kind of like, that's when the conversations about audience and time and place can come in. But their first reaction is not to think about it. It's just, I am allowed to be me. I want to use my authentic voice and authentic self, and I'm going to put it in any communication or any space that I go into.
Yeah, because that's how they would do it on social media, right? In other ways. So.
And left unchecked, right? Like their messages are coming across in one full run-on sentence, right? But those are certainly things that we can help with while embracing and helping them embrace that authenticity of who they are and what their voice is. Kate's point reminds me of it's part of it's in the article, but I see it very often. Have you noticed that your Gen Z students struggle with failure more so than older generations? What is your sense? Is it a, you know, is the sense of fear of failure appropriate, as Nate would say, at this stage, or do they seem more fearful than before? Teresa.
Hi, everybody. I think I'm going to spice it up a little bit, and maybe play a little bit of the devil's advocate, or just say what's on my mind, I guess. So
yeah.
I think, in my opinion, I think they do seem to struggle with failure a little more. And I'm wondering, because I don't know for a fact, if it has anything to do with them being raised in a time in which people get participation trophies. Like, I get a trophy because I participated, even though I may not have been in first, second, or third place. And the reason why I'm wondering this is because, at least in the past, it would seem, or at least lately, despite the fact that these article comments, that it seems in general that people just want to, quote unquote, go to college, but they don't realize that the going is not enough. You have to go and do the work. And for example, we're talking about them being in this age of technology, where they have everything at their fingertips and they're into technology, and that's how they like to do it. But then if you post something to Brightspace, for example, that says something is due on this time, then they ask you for convenience purposes, I guess, as opposed to using the technology that they have to see the facts. So I'm just going to just throw it out there to spice things up a little bit. That's all I have to say.
I was waiting for someone to do that. Thank you, Teresa. Responses? Other perspectives or same perspectives? I know you all. I saw a lot of smiles as Teresa was talking, so I know thoughts popped up.
I think
for you
Susan
all.
has.
Susan, sorry.
Okay, this is not something I've gotten a lot, but I've gotten it a little bit, which is that, and I think this reflects because I have a child who's in the DOE, like DOE ELA programs often give really explicit directions on how to do writing assignments. So I've had students say to me, well, I want to know exactly what this paper is supposed to look like. And I'm like, oh, it's supposed to be a research paper, you know, like, and that's like not sufficient. And then when I've seen the assignments that like my sixth grader has, they tell him every sentence in every paragraph to write. And I was just like, why do they even ask him to write this? If the directions are, so it's like, I don't know if this reflects a trend in ELA, because New York City schools are doing Common Core. That's New York State level requirements. And so he's being taught to the test like everybody else in the public school. So I don't know if that reflects, you know, changing K through 12 learning outcomes, but like definitely students seem to want more guidance on what the paper should look like that I didn't get. And I didn't get from students. Like I didn't get that when I was growing up and I was in school, and I didn't get that from students until a little bit more recently. So that was new for me. And I try to give them more guidelines, but also tell them like, it's not like high school. I'm not going to tell you what each paragraph has to say, because there should be more of like your voice and your creativity in here.
That's so fascinating. And you see folks validating your point, Susan. I saw Dan with his thumbs up. And it's interesting, you know, is that assignment an ELA for your kid? Was that to think and learn, as Mark said, or was that to complete the assignment? Right? Because it ended up being just a fill in the blank, right? You need to, this is the first sentence, the second sentence, and so on. Kate, do you want to add?
Yeah, and I'm gonna say this I'm gonna try and say this without any judgment, right? But just establishing where these students are coming to us from, right? So Susan described some of the and I guess Teresa too, some of the educational experiences that they and supports that the students and scaffolding. I don't want to use the word scaffolding because I still like scaffolding, but that they went through their K through 12. And then just think about the parents of what parents, this helicopter parent term. This is the parents of the Gen Z students. We did not have those parents. Well, if those of you who are not Gen Z in this room or millennials, but we did not have those parents, right? So the parents of Gen Z students are really trying to create a safe, predictable environment for their students. And if needed, they go and advocate for them, do things for them, fight for them. So the students, to create that safety that they desire for their students. So this is, and again, there's no judgment here, but we are going to be working with students who might need more weaning off and more kind of like guidance towards independence, even though they in some cases they are also surprisingly independent, right? But maybe not in others.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, this weaning off approach is a really great one to consider too. If you find that your students are they're really intolerant of the ambiguity. So they're asking Susan, for instance, like, what do you mean? What should I put in these paragraphs? What should I include, et cetera? Because I imagine that the source of anxiety for them is, how do I complete this assignment and how do I do well, right? I cannot fail. I need to be able to complete it. And perhaps in the weeding off approach, it is, clearer instructions to start and then slowly pulling back and allowing them sort of the creativity and independence to add on their own. Teresa also mentioned this just showing up participation trophy type trend. And I think we see that a lot when we're wondering why, and I work with students who need additional support a lot. That is my favorite thing to do, like the students who have been overlooked and just need someone to provide a little bit more guidance. Students who are just showing up to class, they show up to every single class and then don't submit any assignments, right? I see some head nods as if like you know who I'm talking about. And I think it goes back to Teresa's point that up until they've been in your classroom, in high school, especially in New York City, you can pass and graduate just by showing up. And I think the question for us is, how do we first understand that that's where they're coming from, but also help students understand that that is not how you're going to be able to pass the class, right? And can we do it faster than failing them the first time and then letting them learn their lessons, right? Toy.
Yeah, I found that I was shocked when I first realized that last year in my hardest course. I had a couple of students that came to every class. They came for the midterm, but they wouldn't submit any assignments, even though I begged, cajoled, and everything, and they finally either withdrew or failed the class. So that's one very puzzling thing. And the other thing that really puzzles me is I more and more I've made sure that my bright space or whatever it is has all the answers for any written assignment, the answers, and I make sure I cover the answers in class. And still, my students prefer to go to the internet and pull up some garbage, some random garbage, rather than go where I've already told them. They will bypass a study guide where I've said it's a docx document. All you have to do is open it up and Control F. You will find the answer in 5 seconds. They will bypass that to search on the internet probably for 10 minutes. Why? That's what I'm wondering.
Good question. Do folks have anything to offer here? That what is the comfort and convenience of just the internet versus a professor's carefully crafted study guide? Jose Luis?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have the answer to that, but I have noticed this semester that there are a lot of students that are somewhat perplexed by the information that I'm giving them. They've actually, one of them in particular this week, sort of in a conversation, one-on-one conversation, says, you're giving us a lot of information that I'm really confused about. And so they seem to be relying on a lot of information that's online. And I sort of feel like I'm playing the myth buster of sorts by giving them, sort of, evidence-based information, and that they've never seemed to have had access to. And it's become quite a challenge, for me at this point. And I sort of sense what's going on. There's like this hesitancy because it's not it's not information that they're used to relying on. And perhaps that's one of the things that they're sort of falling back on, right? They're used to going on internet. They're used to getting a lot of things through social media, information through social media. And as you know, that's not always the most reliable source. So I've sort of been challenging them to really open their eyes about doing some critical thinking, and I've actually emphasized that in class. So like, where are you getting your sources, and how reliable is the information, and where am I getting the sources? I tell them that we're taking an evidence-based approach in this class, and so they're sort of figuring out what that actually means right now. So I think that seems to be a lot of what the students are going through. They're used to being online. They're used to getting, quick answers and using, the internet in that fashion.
Absolutely. And I saw a lot of head nods. And, one thing that to find the answer in, let's say, Toy or Jose Luis's Brightspace, students might have to actually look, right? They have to find the answer. Google, you ask Google a question and it answers that question for you, right? So like the convenience and the difference in the way they interact with information. One thing you might try that has been helpful for me and in times where I have to share a lot of information, both to students and faculty and to everyone, is would it be appropriate to structure it as an FAQ? So just to wean, right? To start off as like, these are commonly asked questions for how to submit a research paper or how to write a research paper. And start them off knowing that, okay, I can find some answers here, and then slowly allow them to find their own answers in other spaces. There was a hand before Kate's, and now it's not here. So go ahead.
It's nothing profound, but I've been teaching for over 10 years. I actually don't see that many differences in the students today. I think there's an initial inclination that maybe students will push for something in a certain way from their experience. But once I say no, I think students take it the same way they always had. I mean, we had students 10 years ago who they weren't maybe using the internet in the same way, but they were also maybe showing up to class or closing their eyes or trying to coast in other ways. Sure. We all also rely on the internet probably more than we would put on. And if we were in the position to take shortcuts, I think we would do similar things. I think that's probably just realistic. And there are a lot of ways to see strengths in that too. Students are also more comfortable advocating for themselves. I think that's part of that. And it's okay that we put up boundaries. We could say no, nice try, but no. But it's not necessarily wrong that students show up and say, well, my old teacher did this, or why not you? Well, that's fine if they want to ask that or push. But even us, you probably put stuff on Brightspace and we're going to ask you instead of just looking there. We could have looked there, but instead we're going to ask you. I think that's something typical.
Yes, that's absolutely right, Pamela. And Mark mentioned this at the kickoff too, that he hasn't seen much of a difference. I forget if he was talking about generations, but certainly not between John Jay and like the honors programs and other elite schools and so on. Kate, go ahead.
Yeah, this actually just an addendum to the discussion about technology, and I apologize if whether I don't remember whether it was in the reading that we shared or I read it somewhere else, but it seems that even within their use of technology, their preferred mode is YouTube. So that's where they get a lot of what they consider learning information on. So yeah, then I went down the rabbit hole and tried to see what's out there on YouTube that they call educational, and they are actually the videos that they summarize probably a full chapter of the book that the students are assigned in a 10-minute video, and they speak a lot faster pace than the PBS documentaries that I grew up with, but and there's lots of visuals there, so it's a very different medium for students to learn from. And I see our students, I see my kids also go to YouTube for information.
Yes, the information is faster, shorter, more entertaining. Yeah, absolutely. Andrew?
We haven't really raised AI yet, but the reliance I'm noticing this year, different sorts of reliance on AI, and probably unreflective, of course. But I require presentations in most of my courses, and they have to develop it, do the technology, but they're now using programs that I think are AI assisted in terms of offering, here's what you should show, what the image you should use or the background you should use for this text. And all of a sudden I was catching up technologically to what they already have available to them, because I didn't realize why they weren't showing like real images from the real world that were illustrating the points they were making rather than just getting whatever was provided to them. So I think there's all sorts of AI issues out there right now that we're not up to speed on, just because it's all available. They're more used to it than we are in terms of how they're relying on it.
Yeah, and they cannot get away from it, right? Like all of our tools are starting to all of a sudden pop up with the AI, support something. And I think, yeah, you're right. This is probably a different faculty interest group for another year on tackling this AI, but your students are certainly using it. And part of it is not their fault because it's so convenient for them. They'd have to turn off, sort of AI pieces in order to avoid it. And so it's just unavoidable at this point. I want to just point to a point that Mark made, that, Gen Z is not the only generation to have gone through hardships and have experienced anxiety. And I think he's asking us or reminding us to sort of focus like how knowing and understanding is one thing that Gen Zers have this heightened anxiety, but how can we help support them, or how can we help them support themselves in order to get through whatever it is that they are going through? Mark, is that a real hand in the Zoom box? Go ahead.
Me with that.
Can't, you're breaking up.
Okay. I just wanted to say that along with that long-winded chat box that I put in there, I don't want to sound like I am denying students' anxieties in this particular historical moment, but I do want to, and I express this to them explicitly, that they really aren't the first generation that these happened to. I mean, there were generations of people that went through AIDS. There were generations that went through different types of homophobia and misogyny and racism that often was much more blatant and much less nuanced than it is in the weird way that it is done today. But at the same time, I often ask students, what are we going to do about it? I mean, we could sit here and bellyache about our own anxieties, or we could kind of figure out what our anxieties mean, and then figure out what we can do either individually or collectively and communally to do something about it. I mean, It feels to me, the reason I always thought we should not be called John Jay College of Criminal Justice, but social justice, because that really is the heart of social justice, to figure out communally what we can do with our collective brain trust. And I want them to believe that they, in fact, are a collective brain trust that can rely on their own brains rather than, and the tools that are given to them, but not just the tools by themselves, because they are too smart just to use the tools by themselves and to I heard the word rely on the tools. It's exactly what I don't want them to do. I don't want them to rely on the tools. I want them to use the tools in creative ways that makes them even smarter.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Agreed with all of that. And I think helping them come out of this idea of perceived helplessness and helping them find more agency is part of all of our work. And it's a perfect segue also to our breakout rooms. And I know, Kate, you had your hand up, so I'll point to you before we go, but agency, yes. The point of this particular first introductory conversation is, yes, to sort of explore what folks are saying about Gen Zers, what our experiences are with Gen Zers. It seems like you all know who the students are in the classroom. And the next step is going into our breakout rooms and into our FIGs to figure out what we do with all of that information, right? How do we teach more inclusively? How do we get students more career ready, since that is the sense of purpose that Gen Zers are looking for, right? Kate, do you want to say anything before we move on?
I put it in the chat since AI came up. The CUNY Innovative Teaching Academy has a 3-part series on using AI. I just attended it right before this session. They had their first kickoff session. It's free. You can just sign up, and then they record it. We'll share the link. So I'm once they share the recording of the first session, I'm happy to post it into our Brightspace module. It was a really interesting conversation about the limitations of the various models that are available, the comparison of the, of the multiple AI models that people are using. And I just learned that they hired, and I do not know the rank, whether it's an assistant dean or an associate dean, or so some title at CUNY Central, who will be leading the AI initiative at CUNY. So it seems that we're going to hear, whether we like it or not, much more about AI. And some of the examples that were shared were actually really helpful. The focus in the part that I was looking at was just simply breaking down information for students, and how we looked at different examples, how AI did it in a way that can be accessible for students. Because sometimes anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on it. I shared the links here. If you click on the flyer, you should be able to get more information, but I'll send it along also in a different format.
Yeah, I mean, also the great thing about this community is when resources like this are shared, we can absolutely post it back into Brightspace for all of you to use and look for. Okay, so with that said, any folks want to share anything before we break into our groups, because we will not come back into this join space for this meeting. Okay, excellent. So Jen is going to launch the breakout rooms, and it should be programmed in a way that you are already listed under your room, and you just click on join.
Did any button pop up?
I can't find where to click. I'm sorry.
Anywhere on the bottom that says breakout room. Right next to the share button.
What right next to which button?
The share button. I don't know if there's anything there.
There's a apps.
Here, let me see.
I'm in the inclusive pedagogy.
Yes, I'm trying. It's telling me to move you into the other one, but hold on. Let's see. Okay, I put it so that you can join yourselves. I don't know if anything else pops up, bigger room.
Let me see now.
Let's
No,
see.
I don't know what's happening.
I also don't know how to unassign you to the room. Maybe leave and come back.
Okay. All right. I don't know if it's going to take me back to you or
will,
where,
it
but I guess we'll see. Okay. Bye.
Okay, I'm gonna assign you to the room now and hopefully it pops up. Okay.
Yes. Thank
Yep.
you.
No problem.